The situation there, the simplest form, is that the bank would, the borrower would take no risk. He would take the return if there was any. The bank would take no risk, or the borrower would take the risk and the return. The bank would take no risk, but not much money. Just get the 2%. Now, what the clever bankers in the world did in the last 5 years is they went away from that magnificent model to something less magnificent, which was that the bank would lend 100%. So that is for the opposite counterparty, the person who's just blowing up their balance sheet. That's a call option. They only stand to make money on the way up. On the way down, they just go bankrupt. They just get wiped out. So either they take the they don't really take any risk. They're just taking the call option. The bank's taking all the risk. The bank's putting their capital at risk, but only getting the funding. Now that's a very curious business model, because the banks are paying for the prices to go up. So what you've got is the banks are funding a Ponzi scheme, which is even worse than being in a Ponzi scheme. Being in a Ponzi scheme, you can make some money for some time. They were, aside from the Ponzi scheme, funding it. So they're only making the 2%, pushing up the price for somebody else to take the profits. They're taking all of the principal risk. It's a charity organisation. That's Medicine Sans Frontières. They're taking all of the risk for the other person to take all the benefit. Just a small funding. So what happens is, finally, people finally, like all Ponzi schemes, they collapse. So rather than Jack selling it to Jill, Jack sells, and the bank's paying a higher price and lending Jill more money. The guy, for some reason, whatever reason, he sells it, and there's no benefit, because the banks can't afford to stand more principal in harm's way. So what we've got is the banks are funding, as a charity organisation, a Ponzi scheme, and they're their own counterparty. It's the ANZ lending somebody to pay out the ANZ. It's a cross between a Ponzi scheme, a charity organisation, and masturbation. It's not a real counterparty. So, what's happened to the banks around the world? They've all gone completely bust. They've gone bust. This is Precedented. This is what it's all about. This is about to happen to the banks in Australia. You can ask questions, I can answer. This is about to happen to the banks in Australia. The banks in Australia have been funding a Ponzi scheme in a kind of a masturbatory fashion. They're going to go bust. It's just a matter of time. It's basically perfectly inevitable. At least it's highly precedented. So the opportunity is we short the banks. John Paulson had this same idea 6 months ago. We can learn from him. It's precedented. Royal Bank of Scotland fell from 400 pence to 200 pence. That's a long way down. At 200 pence, he shorted Royal Bank of Scotland. Prior to his shorting Royal Bank of Scotland, Royal Bank of Scotland had one of the biggest rights issues of all time. In May, it raised £12 billion to buttress its capital base. Prior to him shorting Royal Bank of Scotland, the government came in and just bailed out Northern Rock. It bailed out some other entities. It was keen to support the depositors. Somewhat similar to what's happening in Australia. The banks are raising capital. The banks are getting support from the government. But this is a solvency issue. The banks have lent in this bizarre fashion, this unmagnificent fashion, into a Ponzi scheme. They've funded a Ponzi scheme. So what happened to Royal Bank of Scotland? Well, after raising £12 billion, they were worth something back then. After getting support from the government, they fell from 200 pence to 11, and they're probably going to be nationalised. The great bankers at Citibank, the great bankers at Bank of America, they're on their knees. Had they had foresight, they would have put some cushions on the ground. this is the situation. So what I'm saying is 2009 is going to be unlike 2008. 2008 was an economic, financial surprise, the numbers changed. 2009, there's going to be parabolic increase in unemployment. People are going to have to abandon their houses. The banks are going to cop it on the chin. They've taken the principal risk. The banks are going to be annihilated. And you can get some pretty cheap insurance for that risk. And we can make a tremendous amount of money. We're going to be eating them tonight. The bulls and the boom time bunnies. I'll take 2 questions and I'll let you think about more questions after dinner. So we'll take just 2. The thing is, if you take all the questions straight away, there's not much dwelling going on. So we'll get a higher quality, not that these 2 questions will be bad, we'll get a higher quality question if we think about it as we're eating. Has anyone got one of the 2? I prefer a question from someone I don't know. I might be surprised by
The best way to short the bank was looking at contracts with
Very good question.
Big question.
What's the question?
Yeah, the question is the best way to short the banks is what? I think it's puts. If you go out and buy long, this is why we've got some stockbrokers here. If we go out and buy deep out of the money puts, we're going to get rotten prices. Pretty plainly, because nobody in the market at that time wants to actually take the other side of that trade. So we're going to be trading the counterparty. We're going to be paying up to 22 times the actual implicit, well, the theoretical price. Remembering most people look at theory, it's good for them. So what we want is we want to find some counterpart. We want to find some people who disagree with me, basically. And we want to find some people who agree with me. The people that disagree, we will give them a premium at a reasonable price. The people that agree with me will pay these people a premium at a reasonable price, rather than getting a market maker made up price, which is just horrific. We'll get a decent price. That's the best way to play it. Good question.